Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Talk Freelance to Me podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Cisneros Mejia, and today I have the grand pleasure to introduce to you one of my longest journalism friends and honestly biggest sources of inspiration, the wonderful, talented Amaris Castillo. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ashley, for having me. I'm so excited to be speaking with you. We go way back.
We do.
So when you sent me that email, I was like, of course. And my only regret is that it took a while to schedule this call. So thank you for understanding.
Absolutely. I mean, you are doing so much. You have so many amazing projects, and I can't wait for the audience to really learn about some of those things. Your story is so cool. I think all the mom writers will really enjoy learning about, how you do motherhood and writing and creating, which is such deep work where you really do need time to think and to create. And that can be hard with little kids underfoot. So thank you for carving out some time for us today, because I know this conversation is going to be so valuable to everyone in our community.
Thank you. And you're also an inspiration to me. And we'll go into that. So
I love that. Thank you so much. Freelance fam, Amaris has done so much in journalism and all different types of journalism, also in, the literature world, in the fiction world. And she can share a little bit about what that, how to write in those different ways. I want to read to you a little bit from her bio. She's done a lot. I'm going to have the full bio on the show notes, so make sure to check this out. But here's a little bit about Amaris. Amaris Castillo is an award-winning journalist, writer, and the creator of Bodega Stories, a series featuring real stories from the corner store. Born in Brooklyn, New York, to Dominican parents, she credits the many tales she heard growing up to her love of storytelling. Amaris has reported for the New York Times, The Sun in Lowell, Massachusetts, the Bradenton Herald, Remezcla, Latina Magazine, Parents Latina Magazine, and so many more. She's received fellowships from the International Center for Journalists, the International Women's Media Foundation, the Society for Features Journalism, and the Journalism and Women Symposium. In 2018, Amaris was named New England Journalism's Newsroom Rising Star by the New England Society of News Editors. And when she isn't reporting for the media on her job, Amaris is piecing together fiction stories. Her writing has appeared in La Galería Magazine, the Aster Journal, Spanglish Voces, PALABRITAS, Dominican Moms Be Like, which is part of the Dominican Writers Association, and so many more. Her short story, El Don, was a prize finalist for the 2022 Elizabeth Nunez Caribbean American Writers Prize by the Brooklyn Caribbean Literary Festival. And she had a short story, The Moon and the Sun, which was longlisted for the same prize in 2021. Amaris does this and so much more. And she's also a proud wife and mom. Girl, you have done a lot.
I'm like, dang, this is a long bio. I'm sorry.
I know. No, don't be sorry. Don't. And Freelance fam, that was just a little bit. There's a lot that she's done. Definitely go to the website and check out her full bio, because I know you're going to be inspired, and it might give you ideas on where you can take your career next. So Amaris, you've done a lot, from working on your current job as an NPR Public Editor and research writing assistant at the Poynter Institute. Okay, talk about an icon institution. You've done newspaper writing, you've done magazine work, you've done fellowships. So what made you become a journalist in the first place?
Yes. Wow. I love that question. First of all, I want to first say that it wasn't difficult for me, really. I think I knew back in high school, I always loved telling stories, and I loved reading as a kid. I devoured books as a kid, but I made that connection to journalism in high school when I was part of the student newspaper. Shout out to Clearwater High School in Clearwater, Florida. I loved that part of my high school experience because I was actually named editor-in-chief of the student newspaper, but I was not good at it. I'm very, sort of non-confrontational, and I was still so young and still learning so much. So I had two of my friends, they were named like the assistant editors. So while they would be the ones, telling our staff, hey, your deadline's coming up, where's the story? I would spend a lot of my lunch hour, like my lunch breaks, in the newspaper office, which was basically the back in this little tiny office behind my English teacher's room. Shout out to Mrs. Murray. She was a huge inspiration to me. I loved, just working on the newspaper, just like the excitement of what are we going to cover, and the seeing your name in print, that never gets old, right? That feeling.
Right.
And so I loved it so much that I had friends, yes, but there was just something about being in that office, tinkering away at the newspaper, and then handing it off and then having it printed, in these batches. And then we would like distribute them throughout the school. This was the mid 2000s. So this was before social media. And then my English teacher, Mrs. Murray, and she was our student advisor as well, our newspaper advisor. She had told me about this high school journalism program at this organization called the Poynter Institute in St. Petersburg, so this nearby city. And she encouraged me to apply, and I did. I got in, and that's when my love for journalism grew even more, because I was in this program with other students my age from other schools in Pinellas County and nearby Hillsborough County. And we were learning from real journalists, Tampa Bay Times journalists. I think this was so long ago that this was when it was called the St. Petersburg Times. We'll have to check the timeline, but I couldn't get enough, just learning from them, trying to soak it all in, their lessons. And then, so when it was time for me to apply to college, there was no other career in my mind. It was, I want to be a journalist. I want to tell stories. I didn't yet make that connection till actually a few years ago. Hey, I can also write fiction, or I can why not try writing fiction? It's storytelling. It's just a different kind of storytelling. That didn't come till much later. Journalism was my love, and I just ran with it. Majored in journalism at USF, University of South Florida in Tampa. Then I couldn't find a job after I graduated. I couldn't find a job. I freelanced. Also, I know we're talking about freelance through this episode, but I want to give you a special thank you and shout out, because I think you're the person who gave me my first freelance gigs. And yeah, so there was really never a question, but can I just share a quick story? This is kind of
I would love that. Yes.
So recently I was looking through this old photo album from my childhood, and I stumbled across this black and white photo. It was kind of like a Xeroxed copy of a photo. So I could barely make myself out there, but I was at my old elementary school in Brooklyn with a few other kids. And it was something like someone had written storytelling contest. And I was like, Ma, what's this? I asked my mom. She was like, oh, you were in a storytelling contest. You were one of the winners.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah, it was amazing. I was in first grade. I have no recollection of this. So I don't remember this at all. I mean, it was so long ago. You'd think I'd remember that. I was 6. I mean, I imagine I was 6 around the time. So that was just such a huge moment for me, where I was just sitting there, like staring at this old photo. I was just stunned, because that sort of solidified to me that this is like my life's work. Like, I have been a storyteller since childhood. Being in this contest, winning, I don't know how I placed, but I was clearly there. Like, I was there standing with a few other students, and there was an administrator behind us. We had some sort of award, and I was just like, wow. So yeah, I needed to tell you that, just to share that little story, because that kind of speaks to how my career has happened.
I love that from childhood, telling stories is what you've done organically, authentically, for fun, for joy. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow. Talk about a full circle moment. And even just thinking about what you just said about that, your high school, that program that they had at Poynter. And another full circle moment, because now you do work at Poynter. And for Freelance Fam, for those of you who maybe haven't heard of Poynter, you need to look it up. because it's a huge deal. This is a highly respected nonprofit journalism school and research organization, and it's all about truth, fact-checking, freedom of expression, and democracy. It's well respected and has done so much important work in the realm of journalism. And I think its place is even more essential considering just what we've seen in the last couple of years in like the discourse in our country about facts, about what are facts, what's truth, what is the media's role. So I've seen it, like I see a couple like full circle kind of themes in your life, and that's so cool. Can you tell us about what you do for Poynter now?
Yes. So I was hired in 2020. We all remember that year, right?
Yeah.
I saw this posting for a research writing assistant for the NPR Public Editor, who is Kelly McBride. She's the senior vice president of Poynter currently, or she's been at Poynter a long time. Amazing woman, media ethicist, boss, mom. So I applied. I was so excited when I got the position. And my main job is I work with Kelly and another coworker to kind of look over. So we have a special inbox, right? And we receive comments and criticisms and questions from NPR's audience. So every week we take some of those comments, we do our own research, we investigate, we interview and reach out to NPR journalists to sort of we're sort of like a bridge between the audience and NPR. A lot of what we do is explain, this is how the NPR journalists sort of thought through this story idea. Sometimes, it's like, yeah, they got this wrong and this is what happened and how they got it wrong. We publish our findings in a weekly newsletter, and it comes out every Thursday. Our newsletters are archived on npr.org. So if you're interested in reading more of our work, you could just Google NPR Public Editor. We have a newsletter. So like I mentioned, we have a newsletter. If you don't subscribe, you can definitely add your email, subscribe, and we'll send you our newsletter, straight to your inbox on Thursdays. We do have a summer schedule, so that changes. The frequency of our newsletters changes during the summer. But I also have another role at the Poynter Institute, and that's contributor to Poynter.org. So I love writing about culture and identity, and I love interviewing journalists. So sometimes I conduct Q&As. So for example, I've interviewed like a taco editor, and after the Uvalde shooting, I interviewed an editor at one of the Texas newspapers just about how local authorities were blocking just the press from speaking with families of the victims. So yes, for Poynter, I am a contributor and I pitch ideas to my editor, and sometimes I'm assigned stories. So it's been great because though so I'm a former newspaper reporter, and I do miss that sometimes, just being out, getting to go out and to the community and talk to, everyday people and feeling like your stories make a real difference. But I've noticed that working at Poynter, a lot of people follow what we're doing and what we're reporting on. And so it's a different kind of impact that I'm able to contribute to with my stories. But it's been great so far. I love it. I love my job, especially just for the chapter in my life right now with 2 young boys. And my boss is just wonderful. She's so understanding. Sometimes daycare will be like, if one of my boys has a fever, they're like, come get your kid. And they're like, as soon as that fever hits, they're like, come pick up your kid.
You got 45 minutes, Yeah.
And I have to stop everything. And, so it's just wonderful. I'm always like, please, whatever you do, I think just management and bosses, it makes such a difference in how your experience with work. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful just for this moment right now and talking to you about my job. So thank you for asking.
Thank you. Your story is so incredible. And so you've had this storied career in journalism and what we think of journalism, like newspapers and reporting. And now you're at Poynter. And then you also have your own things, your own short stories, Bodega Stories, which was super cool. You're also doing mentorships as well. Can you tell us more about these cool projects you're working on now and how you've switched gears from news to fiction and doing even both news in the morning and during the day and then flipping that to fiction at night.
Yes, thank you so much. So let's see. It is a challenge because I don't have an MFA. I feel like I'm kind of late in the game to be writing fiction. I'm like, what am I doing? But I love reading fiction. And there are so many writers, authors that I admire, Julia Alvarez, I can name a few, Angie Cruz, Elizabeth Acevedo, Jesmyn Ward, just so many. And yeah, actually a lot. Some of them are moms. And so I'm like, if they can do it, why can't I try, to fulfill this dream of becoming a published author someday? So right now, a few weeks ago, I finished a manuscript that I had been working on since last year. It's a middle grade book about a young Dominican American girl in Brooklyn and just like her summer shenanigans. And while I was drafting it it felt so therapeutic because I was channeling like my inner preteen, remembering what that time was like for me when I wanted to do certain things and I wasn't allowed to, and why not? Questioning everything and your parents. And so I am undergoing a mentorship program right now through Latinx in publishing. They're a great organization that help emerging writers like me. They pair us with mentors, established authors. My current mentor is Shamile Said Mendez. She's an amazing author of children's books, YA, adults. She's so prolific and so generous and kind. She actually gave me homework recently that I'm working on. I'm meeting with her at the end of this month, and I just hope to make her proud. We're going to be revising. She read my entire manuscript already, marked it up with a bunch of questions, things to think about. And I trust her judgment and just appreciate her generosity and helping me get it to the next level. So the next phase is going to be revising the manuscript until I feel that it's ready. I've been querying agents. So I want to be published traditionally. So last year I started querying literary agents, trying to find representation. So that's in the works. I don't know how much I can say about that, but I can say that I have been in touch with agents who want to see the full manuscript. So I'm hoping to follow up on that. And I really, really would love to, sign with someone who's willing to represent me, not just for this manuscript, but just for the long haul, because I really want to continue telling stories, just for like the next generation. But we'll see. It's been a learning curve for sure. I'm reading craft books. I'm listening to author interviews. There's so much that you can learn if you have that hunger and motivation and drive. There's so many free resources online. And just listening to an author nerd it out with an interviewer, you can learn so much from that. And I actually love interviewing authors. Another thing I do that has helped me, and it's germane to this question, is I also review books for the Dominican Writers Association, and I get to interview authors for that. And it's been amazing because you read a book and then you're so curious and you have so many questions and you're like, oh, the only person that you can really ask is the person who wrote
the author, right?
It's like, who else am I going to talk about this with unless, you have a friend who read the exact same book? And it's like, me and my friends are all on different wavelengths. When it's like, I'll read a book, but they haven't gotten to it yet, or they've read a book and I haven't gotten to it yet. So it's like, I get the opportunity to interview authors about like the decisions they've made. Why? Tell me about this character. Who inspired this? So I love that. And my dream is to one day have a book that I've written that others will read and that we can continue that conversation, because what I'm writing, a lot of it comes from my own life experiences and questions that I have and interrogations that I have about my own culture, about, like, why do Dominicans do things this way? And it's been great. It's been great. I don't know how else to describe. With Bodega Stories, it's on a hiatus right now because I've just been so focused right now on my middle grade book journey. But once that is complete, I'm hoping to continue with my project. I have thought of maybe one day turning that into a book or expanding that into some sort of nonfiction project. we'll let you know how that goes. That's something that I've definitely been thinking about as well.
I love all of this. This is so exciting. It's so exciting to see you translate, this love of writing in a new way to telling these stories and using your own lived experience and sharing that, because, that's part of the human experience. We all kind of experience this world from our own lenses and all of our culture and our family history and where we exist in time and space and geography. And I think there's so much you can learn in sharing that story. It's only something that you can do. No one else is going to be able to share that experience the way that you can, because it's yours. So that's super cool. I'm so excited to read it when it's published, and I know it will be published, and I know there will be a series, and I know I'm confident that this is we're getting a little preview. So I feel so honored to be part of that. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. And I hope we can talk later on just about balancing that though with motherhood, because it's like I still feel like I'm on clouds, on a cloud, talking about reaching this point where it's completed and I'm revising, and it's been so much fun. But to get there, it was a battle.
So let's talk about it. What were some of the practical, because I think no one talks about that, right? I've heard of conversations about, doing pitch slams and going to Writer's Digest conferences and meeting with agents and queries and things like that. But what does it take in practicality? How did you carve out when you've got two precious little boys and you're creating? You're not doing data entry where you can have people screaming and, it's more, you're not really using that part of your brain. How did you do it?
Yeah. It's just a fight. It's a constant fight for pockets of time. Half hour, 5 minutes. I'm here, writing a scene on, because I wrote my manuscript on Google Docs. So sometimes if my kids were distracted, we're in the playroom and they're each doing their own thing, I would open the Google Doc on my phone and I'd just be typing, continuing working, chipping away at a scene. There were times where, my husband's a huge sports fan. And I am a sports widow, okay? Let me tell you, I like sports. I love the excitement of hockey.
Yeah.
And I understand that sport, I think, the most. But most of the sports, it's I don't really understand all the rules or all that's happening. I kind of look to him to be like, oh, is this good? Is this bad? I don't know. So I'm a certified sports widow if there was a thing.
I love that.
Because I lose this man to sports. And there's a time where there's 2 sports around the same time and there's a game every day. So there were times also when he would have a game or a game after a game, whatever, he's glued to the TV. And it's he's partially checked out. And so it's okay, well, you're doing your thing. So I'm going to go upstairs to my home office and play at my book. Because that's one of his passions. And one of my passions is this very solitary thing of writing and thinking and what is my character up to now? How is she feeling? Well, describe, the body language and the setting and what's her building like and her abuela and this and that, her mom and dad, and what food are they eating? How does it smell? That I love. And I will do that. Oh, another thing. Okay, let's talk about how when you're a mom, it is 24/7. Okay. And I know that you were going to ask me about motherhood and writing, and we'll also go into that, but just real quick. Another thing is I had 2, for your listeners, let's call them, and I'm putting up the quotation marks with my fingers, writing residencies. Okay. My first writing residency it happened because I got COVID. Okay. I got COVID and I tested positive on a Friday evening, just as we were about to ramp up the bedtime routine.
No.
My husband looked at me and we looked at those 2 positive lines, baby. He was like, you need to go upstairs now and quarantine. And I went up to my home office. I closed the door and I was like, what do I do with myself now? For that whole weekend, he would leave me pizza and meals outside my door, mugs of hot coffee, my cafe with my milk and my cream the way I like it.
Right.
And I was left alone. And only then could I was like, you know what? I'm going to turn this into a positive. And I'm working on my book. I finished reading a book that I had been struggling to finish for a month because of kids, because of these blessed children. That's what I call them, to not call them something else. My blessed children.
I'm with you.
Or in my full-time job, I'm like, I finished the book. I finished reading the book. I wrote a review of the book and I chipped away at my manuscript. And it was the most, like, I internally, and I know, obviously I know COVID, we're still in pandemic times, right? And millions have died from COVID pandemic. And I understand that. However, there was a tiny part of me that was like, oh my God, this is a break. This is a break. Actually, Wanda Sykes, one of my favorite comedians, she spoke, I think, to an NPR journalist recently and talking about how when she got COVID, it was like, this feels like me time.
Right. No one's bothering me.
And she was like, wait a minute, how do I get some of that long COVID?
Right. I need an extended recovery time, please. Yeah.
Yes. So, I mean, it's like, I never like internally asked for long COVID. However, that weekend, it was only a few days where I was testing positives. The second I tested negative, forget about it. It was back to reality. But that was I called it my bootleg writing residence. It was my bootleg writing residency because I physically couldn't be, like, my kids couldn't be near me. I did not have to wipe any snotty noses, have to fetch any snacks, break up any fights, heal, comfort, none of that. I was focused on my creativity and my craft. And it was like, wow. And then the second time was my husband had sensed that I really needed a break. So Poynter, we have a winter break in December. It's like 2 weeks where we're like essentially like shut down in a way, right? So my husband was like, why don't you go somewhere to write? And preferably somewhere far. And we decided, which I was fine with. Oh my goodness. I ended up going to New York, back to my old neighborhood in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, Brooklyn. Shout out to Crown Heights. It was the same street where I grew up, to my abuela's old apartment where I lived during my master's program at Columbia. And I stayed there. My tio's still living there. I stayed there just for a few days, just a few days, but I was able to write a lot. I did research at the Dominican Studies Institute in the CUNY system uptown. I met with old friends. I met the founder of the Dominican Writers Association, who I write for. I mean, it was just such a productive few days. And I was literally only there from like the 19th to the 23rd of December.
Wow.
I packed it in, and I even saw family.
Wow, I'm impressed.
But I was like, because I wasn't working in those days. I was being a mom because I was still checking in on my kids, but like the physical of, you being there, the presence, all the work, and it's labor to be a mom. It is labor. It's a blessing, but it is physical work. It is physical work. You know what I mean? And so I was like detached from that. And so I was able to do so much more. And I'm hoping that I'll be able to somehow find another writing residency. There are organizations out there that support you. You know, there's application process and all that, but they'll, that you can go for a week or 2 weeks or even a few days. And they have special fellowships for parent writers. I actually applied to one recently and I didn't get it. However, I was offered a writer in residence that never expires. So if I want to go, I can go and at a discounted rate and stay there. And they prepare meals for you and all that. And you're like in a cabin.
Oh my God, this is what I need.
Go for it if you can. I know you're a mom too, so it's hard.
Oh my goodness. You shared so many insights and gems and just truths in sharing that experience. Because first of all, if we think about what the expectations, and I don't know if it's society's expectations, I don't know if it's internalized expectations that we have or that we think others expect from us because of our cultures, that it takes a global pandemic, a killer virus, to have enough merit to allow us a break.
That's the only one too.
Sitting in like thinking about what that means. I mean, first of all, you took, or I guess second, because I already said first of all, but you took lemons and you made that lemonade, girl. You made pictures and pictures of lemonade from that experience. But yeah, like it takes you getting this virus? Like what? I love that your husband was so supportive of letting you create your own, after the bootleg one, creating an Amaris Brooklyn residency for yourself. But it's a lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot.
And I want to say something real quick, actually, to add to that, because I know that you were going to ask me about this, but I had written an essay for Asterix Journal about this very thing, my personal battle to find time to write as a mom and to chase this dream and to also be a present mom and a good mom, because, you know, it's like mothers are such big, prominent figures in our lives. If you grow up with a mom or a maternal figure, you know, I know not everyone has that in their life, but I remember that when I got back from New York, my eldest son, he was, I want to say 3 at the time, almost 4. He turns 4 in January. He was like, "Mommy, I missed you. I missed you, Mommy." And he ran to me. He was just like clinging to me, hugging me. He wouldn't let me go. I went over to, like, I was cradling him, you know, hugging him, just holding him. And we went to the couch and he was like, just stuck to me like cheeklet, like glue. And I remember he wouldn't stop. He said it so many times how much he missed me. And I was only gone for a few days. And while I was on those few days, I was so just happy and just doing my own thing and channeling my pre-child life and just being productive and chasing my dreams and being that go-getter that I know that I still am. But let me tell you, during that time, my absence was felt. And it was literally carving a space in my son's world where he was like, "Where's my mom? Where's my mom?" And so when I came back, he was so happy. I've never seen him that happy. And then later I was talking to my therapist and I was like, you know, I started crying because I was like, it was a complicated reality that I was met with, you know, like I was remembering how I felt in New York, just like free, just running through these streets free, right? No obligations, no, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But then it's like, oh, every second when after he comes home from school, he's like, "Where's my mom? Like, what, you know, I miss my mom." And so that was hard because it's like, I could not have done that, gone on my trip without leaving them. So where does that leave me and other mother writers who are just, they're trying to pursue their dreams and they kind of, it's like, you got to figure out a way to fold your kids into your dreams. It's very hard because just think about all the time that you dedicate to your children that you can't possibly be creative in those times or very productive, right? Because you know, it's like you can only I multitask, but I can't really write. I can't really work on my fiction while also caring for my kids. It's like I got to really concentrate for that and think about my characters, these fictional characters. You know, I can't do that while I'm figuring out what I'm going to do for dinner.
100%. And you think about the nature, especially of fiction writing, I imagine. I mean, writing in general, I feel, you know, it's a cerebral, it's a brain power, right? That you're doing to make sense of things and thinking how to present it in a specific way for a specific objective. And it's all internal, especially fiction. You know, news writing is external. So you're looking at the facts and you're fact checking and you're formatting it and your inverted pyramid and making sure you're objective and you told both sides and the reporting is thorough. But fiction to me sounds completely internal. It's you literally going into this whole internal space to create, but this whole internal world, like you were talking about the neighborhood, how it looked, the sounds, the scents, everything sensory that you were experiencing in this world that you're experiencing, you're creating, and then you're also translating that and you're communicating that new world that you've created in words for your audience so that they can experience that too. So that's literally, you have to be in your own head for that to work. You can't, and see, I think that's the struggle. I think it's a struggle for all moms who are doing some kind of work, but I think especially for creative work, for writers, and maybe that's where the frustration comes from because it's literally, it's like realms. It's like a metaverse or something. It's like you want to go in there, but they're pulling you, they're pulling your arm, and it's like, I peed my pants. I want apple slices. I want Cheez-Its. Oh, brother hit me. You know, it's like, yeah, I don't think I anticipated. Everybody always said motherhood would be hard. And so I expected it to be hard, but I don't think I understood the mental labor. It's all labor. All of it's laborious, right? But the mental piece that you need to be present, and you can't multitask when you're creating. You can multitask watching a Zoom call maybe, or I don't know, like I said, data entry earlier, but yeah, I think that frustration is real. Like I feel that. That's a whole thing. I don't know if you take these essays and I don't know if it's a book, I don't know, but I've never heard anybody talk about that except you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. It's hard. And when you were saying about world building, it's interesting because I realized, so I have 2 kids, right? And when you mention the world building, yes, you're world building when you're writing fiction and doing creative work. But if you think about it, you're also world building for your kids.
Yes, that's true.
You're literally building their world and their environment, what they're exposed to, what they do. We have our eldest in swim class right now. And it's like, that is a thing he expects now every Saturday is swim. And then also just like they have a playroom. They're fortunate enough to have a playroom. And it's completely exploded with toys.
Right.
Workbooks and books, but it's like, this is their world. And you as their parent, you are building their world as well. And it's just like, I'm tired.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Can we clone ourselves? Is there AI for that? There's AI for all this other stuff. Maybe somebody, I don't know if it's Zuckerberg, somebody needs to, Elon Musk, somebody needs to help us out.
For Mother's Day recently, I told my husband, what I would really love for Mother's Day is to be left alone.
For real. I want to be left alone from everybody who made me a mom. Husband, babies, y'all, love y'all. But yeah, I get it.
And I think I'm trying to remember. I think I got to go to Starbucks for a little bit, which was nice. But there's a deep guilt too that, I feel responsible and I am responsible for them. I'm such a big part of their lives that even going to Starbucks for 2 hours, I feel strange. And I find myself, and I'm working on this with my therapist, but I find myself texting my husband like, oh, I'll leave in 15 minutes. Or how are the kids? It's like, why do I have to do that? He's their father. He has it taken care of. But there's just so much that's written about mothers and just like all the, what you said, labor, physical, mental, emotional, really, really mental. I think mental is perhaps the biggest one. You're just like always on. And even when they're asleep, you're like doing stuff for them, right? You're just like getting the house ready, picking up the playroom. There was a photo that I had posted a few months ago on my Facebook of my kids' playroom in complete disarray. I had given up on it. I was like, I'm done. I'm like, this is the photo of a mom who has given up. And I had so many people responding. Other moms are like, no, you're doing amazing. Don't worry. They're kids and this and that. And it's like, but I get anxiety looking at it in disarray. So then it's like, there goes the physical again. You got to clean this up. But right now it's in disarray. I'm going to text you a picture of the playroom. So the options are clean the playroom a little bit or have them have another day of it looking like that. Have another day of them looking like that. It's going to be fine.
I think it is. And I have a friend who has 3 kids. She has kids too, and her kids are older. And so I kept telling her how I kept like focusing on putting all the Hot Wheels cars in one bin and the Paw Patrol ones in another. And she's like, why? Why? She's like, what did Einstein say about the definition of insanity? She's like, why are you spending so much energy? She's like, that's how you want it. You know that they're going to dump all this out. She's just get one basket and make them put all the stuff. And they're going to be Barbie shoes, Hot Wheels, Paw Patrol, Blippi. All of it could be together. She's like, you're the only one who's focused on putting them in these bins or they don't care. And I was like, you're right. Why am I wasting all this energy? It's a lot.
Yeah, actually, I did that recently too. I totally can relate. I was putting all the dinosaurs together.
I love it. I think there's something there. There's something there because I've heard expressions about that. And I think the nature of creative writing and motherhood, like I said, you're the only one that I've seen tackle that. And I felt so seen. I felt so much like, yes, like someone gets it. So I don't have any answers, but I think we need to talk about that more. We need to have more support and more community about that, because a lot of women, a lot of mothers who do happen to be writers, I think will resonate a lot with your essays about that topic.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Writing it, I didn't realize, because I'm new to the world of literary journals, just how long the process is from pitching the idea to them approving it to you working on it. It was multiple revisions to get it to be finally published. And it's a two-parter. So one is the personal essay where I really dive deep into my struggle to find time to write while mothering, navigating both, juggling both. And then there's a second part where a separate piece where I interviewed authors who are mothers and asked them, how were you able to do this? Like, how are you managing both? And, one of the biggest takeaways I got from that is there's never an optimal time to write. Like, you just have to find the pockets of time, because you're not going to be handed a 3-week writing residency every day.
Yes.
You got to make it work. And then also, just like setting small goals. Maybe this week, you'll strive to write 1,000 words. And then next week, 1,000 words. And in a year, you can have a full manuscript if you just. So I struggled with that. Also, the concept of writing a whole novel, it was so daunting to me. I'm actually still sorting through my feelings of just trying to tackle that adult fiction novel that I've been dreaming of. It's just, I'm working on it, but it can be so daunting, especially for journalists like me, because I'm so used to, the instant gratification. You write an article, it's edited, it's online. You write an article, it's online, blah, 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 boom. Novel, it's like, oh, you're in this for a long time, because you're writing it, you're drafting it, you're dwelling on your characters, you're thinking about them, even in the shower, on the way to work, and listening to all these author conversations, reading craft books. Every person's journey is different. Mine is coming from a place where I'm trained as a journalist. I'm educated as a journalist. Journalism is what I know. Now I'm trying to enter this world that is still sometimes opaque to me, as far as like storytelling and plot points and character arcs. There's this whole vocabulary that I'm still grappling with and, learning more about and understanding. And, I'm willing to put in the work. I'm doing the work. It's just that work takes time. And time is fleeting. Time is precious. Time is priceless. So I'm trying to be very intentional this year about how I spend my time. Whereas I know I'm active on Instagram. I admit I'm active on Instagram. However, I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be better right now of like, hey, why don't I put my phone down in my free time? The little free time I have. Remember, I'm a mom. You're a mom. You understand. How about I put my phone down and read this damn craft book so I can understand about the third rail of novel writing? And like, I'm learning now about how plot is the external events that happen in the book, but it's not the story. The story is how those events impact your character. And that's the story that readers are most drawn to, is they want to see that internal struggle of the character. The character, when the novel starts, the character comes in with a misbelief or really wanting something. And then all these things happen, right? That kind of throw roadblocks to, in front of the character. And the way the character is impacted and that struggle, and then how different the character is at the end, or the change, that struggle is what readers can't get enough of. So it's a lot of brain science I'm learning. I'm reading right now, this was at my mentor's suggestion, I'm reading Story Genius by Lisa Cron. So I'm almost halfway done with the book. That's part of my homework that I have right now from my Latinx in Publishing Writers Mentorship Program. But it's just, I'm learning so much, and I'm just grateful because I want to know and I want to understand and I want to learn, because I really would love to, as I mentioned, be an author someday. And it's just a huge learning curve for a journalist like myself. But again, I do have that core of being a storyteller. I love stories. I love listening to stories, reading stories. I could listen to the elders in my family talk all day. Let me tell you, when I was a little girl, I love spending time with my cousins, but one of my favorite things to do at family gatherings and at holiday parties was to go to the kitchen and just listen and be nosy to what my mom and my tias were saying, because they'll be like, "No me diga, dame ma." And I'll just be like, "Oh my gosh," they were my first storytellers, like the women in my family, my parents. They would tell stories in such a non-linear way. So I think that the seed was planted then in my childhood was, oh, wow, you could tell such a great story. And like the people in my family could tell, my relatives could tell really wonderful, juicy, scandalous, all stories. I just want to continue that tradition and just like see what I can come up with, from my generation. But we'll see. I will keep you updated on that.
I love it. You think about it. Yeah, those are our first stories, is not even so much the childhood, the storybooks, the picture books that we maybe read as kids. But yeah, like our family, our parents, I think of my dad, I think of my grandpa. Like my dad, he's very animated. If it's a good story, he's standing up. He has to stand up and tell. If he's on the couch, he has to stand up. He's like doing the voices. He's like different voices for different characters. There's pauses. There's sounds. He's making sounds. He's mimicking things. The facial expressions, the gestures. It's a whole experience. So I think that is, I've never thought about that in that way. And that's so cool. And I'm sure that influences your storytelling when you're telling this YA book that you have coming out soon, The Shenanigans. Like, I'm excited to hear it, to read it.
And I want to say also, like, I noticed that with Dominicans too, like they'll take up the whole room telling stories. They'll pace around with the hand and just the back and forth. I actually have a video from my honeymoon. We went to DR for my honeymoon, my husband and I, and we did a tour to the capital, Santo Domingo. And we did a stop at a cigar shop. And there my husband was chopping it up with the owner, the tour guide, and the owner of the cigar shop. He's telling a story, and he's just so masterful about the pausing and then the stepping back and the stepping like this and that. And then it was like there was the punchline, there was the kicker at the end. Everybody's laughing, and I was like, I love this. And that's actually, since I know earlier we were talking about writing residencies, I would love to do a writing residency in the Dominican Republic at some point. I myself in the campo somewhere, but I need Wi-Fi still. I could be in the campo, but I need Wi-Fi because
we need Google Docs. We need this stuff to sync.
I need Google Docs. Yeah, I'm like I need the Google Doc. To just immerse, in the country, in the culture, with the people. Like, I don't know. There's just something about that. I would love to. And actually, the manuscript that I've been working on, my character goes to DR at some point in the story. She goes over there. And so I've had to rely on my memory, also like looking up YouTube videos, the motoconchos and what kind of trees. And it's like all this sensory stuff. I'm relying on all the summer trips I would take to DR because my parents, that's the only place they would vacation at.
Right.
Was DR. They didn't know it's like no other country exists. I've even now they're nearing retirement age. I'm like, Ma, Pa, why don't you go somewhere else in Latin America? Somewhere else that's not DR. And they're just not having that. So I'm like, okay. And so then it's kind of like, oh, I find myself doing the same thing. Like I have this yearning to go back. But I'm hoping, we're planning a family trip at some point, hopefully this year. But I would really love to do a residency, even if it's at my abuela's house. She lives in a barrio, a loud barrio. But I'm like, hey, I can get some writing done like in the early morning. So we'll see.
I love it. I can't wait to. I think that is a wonderful idea. And I think that you definitely have the community. Like if you wanted to host it, if you wanted to get fellow writers, like I could totally see that happening. And I think that would be really cool to see what comes out of it.
Thank you so much.
That's so cool. So you have, I know, a lot of people in this community, they freelance. Some of them do it after work. Some of them do it full time. There's some people that want to actually like leave their job and pursue freelance full time. And I know you're writing right now a lot of fiction projects, so it's not projects. So it's not, freelance writing per se, but you still have to balance a lot. We've talked a lot about motherhood. Can you tell us how you balance in terms of work, like your full-time 9 to 5, and then flipping that gear and being able to write about these independent projects and work on them at night? How do you balance those two things?
Yeah, it's hard. I find myself sometimes using my lunch hour for freelance. So recently I interviewed an author for a new outlet. I'm trying to expand like my freelance work in like books coverage. Like I've become a lot more interested in covering books, interviewing authors. So recently I used my lunch break when I was at Poynter. So I do a hybrid schedule for my job. So I work from home Mondays and Fridays, and 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I drive to Poynter and I work from the office there with my boss. So I used my lunch break. It was like a small window, but I was like, this is when I'm going to interview the author. I did the interview, ate my food, back to work. And then that was it. It was like, oh, it was such a huge weight off me. I got the interview done. And so now it's kind of like, when's my next pocket of time? It's like, it's a day-to-day thing. Every day I have to like assess, do I have time today? And then I'm a stringer. I'm a freelance stringer for the New York Times. So sometimes they'll call me and they'll say, we're looking for help with this XYZ story. Do you have the availability or can you help? There have been times where I've said, I've had to say like increasingly no, only because of the demands of my full-time job, the demands of motherhood. Whereas before I started at Poynter, when I was a stay-at-home mom, I was a stay-at-home mom for 10 months. It was the hardest job I've ever had because the pandemic began. Also, I was a few months at home with my son. This was when I only had one, and it still felt like a million, right? I had one, and then the pandemic began, and my mom, I remember her calling me. She has a bodega. She owns a bodega with my dad. She told me, don't you dare bring the baby to the bodega because everybody has COVID around these streets, around these parts, whatever. Like, so I got to take care of my kid all day myself? Like, it's funny. I mean, it was like, I joked about it, but it was like, there was some heavy truth in that, and like a seriousness where I was like, I felt so overwhelmed because I was by myself with him all day. I had to entertain him. And it's like, how do you entertain a toddler whose energy is on 1,000, But I remember when the New York Times would call me, I would drop everything, including him. I would drop him off at the bodega. Pre-pandemic, I would drop him off. I'd be like, Mommy, Abu and Abuela got you. I'll go do this New York Times gig real quick.
Yes.
It was the New York Times. For me, I have read the New York Times for so long. I respect their work. I love their work. So when I had the opportunity to string for them, I was like, I'm going to go for it. And it was great. But it's gotten a lot more difficult for me to freelance. So most of what I do now is books coverage, freelance. I write, as I mentioned before, for the Dominican Writers Association. I interview authors for them. And I also sometimes review books. And so that's a freelance gig. I also have all my freelance assignments approved by my boss, but she's super supportive. I think as long as it doesn't directly relate to what I do for Poynter and the NPR Public Editor's office, then it's fine. And books coverage falls under that. And a lot of what the New York Times does as well, because, for example, I helped them with the Super Bowl coverage, their sports team. I was there that day. This was when Super Bowl was in Tampa. And the Bucs were, playing. So I was outside the stadium that day, and I was pregnant too. And I was just, my phone died. It was like a crazy time. And I was like out there, and there were a bunch of healthcare workers who got tickets to the Super Bowl. And right across the sidewalk, right outside the line, the special line that was for healthcare workers, were people who were picketing. And they weren't picketing. They were like protesting. They were like anti-vaxxers. And so then I was interviewing them. It was for the sports blog. It was a live blog. And I remember I was just trying to interview whoever I could. And I ended up interviewing the sisters of an assistant coach for the Chiefs. And then I got the interview done, but then my phone died. And I was like desperate looking around. I found a really nice Tampa police officer who saw that I had the little belly, and then my phone died, and he let me charge my phone in his car. I just sat there and waited for my phone to charge, knowing damn well that the editor at the New York Times was waiting to get my contributions, like through email. So I was freaking out, and I just have so many freelance stories like that. Another time this happened, the amazing Dominican American author Julia Alvarez, who I admire, and I've interviewed her a few times, years ago when I was a newspaper at the Bradenton Herald. I was scheduled to interview her, okay? And I was a night cops reporter at the time, and I was going to interview her on my lunch break. DK lunch break, you know what ended up happening? I got sent to cover a fire. So I got sent to cover this fire that destroyed this, or semi-destroyed this family's house. The fire had already gone out, but I'm interviewing the family, and then I'm realizing, oh my goodness, I have my scheduled call soon. So I ran to my car where I had parked. It was in this little mobile home park. I ran, and I was only like a minute late. And she called me, kind of was like, what happened to the interview? And I was like, Julia Alvarez. She's like one of my idols as far as literature. I fell in love with her book, In the Time of the Butterflies, about Las Hermanas Mirabal. And I was just like, oh my God, I can never be late again to an interview with Julia Alvarez. So that's one thing about the freelance life, is that if you're juggling other things, like an actual full-time job, things are not going to go as smoothly as you expect, especially if you're a journalist, because my job, I covered breaking news, so it was very unpredictable. I could be so organized and scheduled, and things will go awry like that day. And I apologize profusely. I explained to her that I was also a reporter and that I was covering a fire, and she was very understanding and sweet. And then I did the interview, and everything was fine. And then that was for the now defunct Vivala.com. And that happens a lot also. There are a lot of Latinx and Latina outlets, or just for the Latina audience, that have shut down. I remember I freelanced before for Flama. They went on Vivala, they went defunct. I was I guess you could call it a permalancer for Latina magazine back in my days after grad school in New York. I remember that time. I don't know if you wanted to talk about the lessons learned during that time.
I would love that. Yes, I know I've taken a lot of your time. Maybe we can, I know the audience is going to really love the lessons learned, because you had a lot of freelance experiences.
So yes, let me just say that I think the biggest lesson I learned as a freelancer, and this was in my early days where I was in my early to mid 20s, super just hungry, I was trying to get a full-time job during my time in New York. After I graduated from my master's program, I really was looking for a full-time job, ended up doing freelance, and it worked out great because I didn't have a mortgage. I didn't have kids at the time. I also didn't really understand or know how to diversify my income. So I didn't have a lot, of income, but I had enough to where I was happy and I was doing well. But the biggest lesson I would say is, do not overextend yourself. Like, you do need to set boundaries as a freelancer. Don't let people walk all over you. Because I remember when I was freelancing, this was during my time for Latina magazine. I remember I helped with social media. So I wrote articles and I also helped with social media. And there were times where I found myself on Fridays where I was expected to schedule social media posts for Facebook for through the weekend. I remember I would stay way past 5 and my hours were till 5. And there was a time where I reached the point where I was like, I'm not going to do this. Like, I'm going to work until my contract says, until that time. And that's my cutoff time. And I kind of had to learn to advocate for myself. But that's generally something that I learned, is that if you're going to go into a freelance contract situation position, just be smart, be clear about what's expected of you. And it's hard because, you're just trying to make it, right? You're just trying to survive. But that was definitely a hard lesson because I was young. And I was burning through my Friday evenings, scheduling social media posts when I should have been off. And so I think also having a good, supervisor or manager to kind of see what's happening and to say, oh, wait, yeah, you can go home now.
Right.
So that was a hard lesson that I had to learn because I was young. I was young, and you learn with every experience,
So much. Oh my goodness. Amaris, you've given us so much inspiration in this episode and just ideas for how writers can take that love of writing and I know people are going to resonate because I hear that all the time from other writers. Like I've always loved to write. I've loved to write since I was a child. I've loved to read. So I know they're going to love that. I know they're going to love all the practical, tips that you gave and just examples of how you've taken writing and you've used it in literature and these book reviews and news and even like social media. You've done a lot. So thank you so much for sharing space with us. Where can people find you online? I know people are going to definitely want to connect with you and also follow you so they can learn about your new book because I know that's going to happen for you.
Hopefully. Thank you. So I'm on Instagram at Amaris Writer. So AMARIS WRITER. And I'm also on Twitter at Amaris Castillo. But I want to say, Ashley, I said I was going to mention this earlier, but thank you. Thank you so much because you gave me the confidence way early on. Remember when you gave me you really gave me my first freelance opportunities for Florida Trends Next? When I didn't know what I was doing, but you saw a hungry girl.
Absolutely.
And you gave me assignments and I still have some of those clips where I have straight out the magazine where I have my name in print. So thank you. Thank you so much for just believing in me back then, believing in me now. You are an inspiration. I look to you and I'm just you are still out here doing it. And you are a mom. You are a mom of more kids than what I have. And I'm just how are you functioning right now? But you are thriving. So I just want to thank you so much for just inviting me to speak with you. This really made my week and it's just started.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. Freelance fam, I'm definitely going to have the links to Amaris's social media handles and her work. So definitely check out the website for more. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
And with that, we've come to the end of another episode. Please make sure you hit subscribe if you haven't already done so, and give me a 5-star review on Apple. This will help out a lot in getting the word out about this brand new podcast. I invite you to check out the show notes and also grab my free Niches Get Riches freelance writing worksheet to brainstorm the best niches for your writing business. If you're not a writer, you can still use it to get business ideas. And until next time, this is Ashley at Talk Freelance to Me. Don't forget, we all get this one precious life. Don't constrain yourself to a box that you were never meant to fit in. It is your right to profit from your own creative gifts. This podcast was created by Ashley Cisneros Mejia. Our music was composed by Donna Rafael of World Instrumentals. Talk Freelance to Me is a product of Phoenix Creative Studio.